Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the September public board meeting for the CQC. We have no apologies for absence. Are there any declarations of interest anybody needs to make? Very good. I'd like to welcome Jenny Ross. Jenny, you're extremely welcome. Jenny is the co-chair of our Gender Equality Network, and Jenny, for this meeting only, do feel as if you are part of the board and involve yourself in every way you can. So that's you're extremely welcome. I don't think I need to welcome anybody else in particular. Takes us to the minutes of our July meeting, and they're a true and accurate record of everything we discussed. Excellent, they are approved. Thank you. There are a couple of things on the action log that are worth just discussing briefly. The first one around the increase in volume. I think we're not entirely sure we understand what brought that about. So there's more work going on, and that will come back at a later date. And item 4, I think we knew and said during the board meeting that some of the targets that were actually on the papers were not the right targets. So that is now confirmed and will be corrected for the future. And everything else, I think, on the action log is due at a later date. Was there anything else arising anybody wanted to raise? Perfect. So, Ian, that comes to you, please.
Thanks, Peter. I think really I wanted just to say one thing before I hand over to colleagues to talk about what the exec team have been up to over the summer period, and that's to present the Responsible Officer's Annual Report. As many of you know, the Commission is required, because we employ doctors, to produce an annual report reporting on the performance of doctors who have what's referred to as a prescribed connection to the Commission, and that's for the purposes of revalidation of those doctors. I can report to the board that all of the doctors with a prescribed connection to the Commission have their revalidation is up to date. They remain fit to practice, and they are without concern. So that's a formal requirement for us to do that on an annual basis. I think the second part of that is also to say that from the 1st of October, Dr. Nigel Aitchison will take over from Professor Nigel Sparrow as the responsible officer for the Commission. Nigel Sparrow has been the responsible officer for some time, and I'd just like to, with your permission, Peter, record the board's thanks for the great work he's done. It is often difficult to carry out this role in an organisation like ours, where there's a number of doctors working for and around us and making sure that the right people have their necessary validation. So I'd like to record our thanks to him and just confirm that the board have approved the moving of the responsible officer role from Nigel Sparrow to Nigel Aitchison. Thanks, Peter.
So can I just add on behalf of the board our thanks to Nigel for all the other work he's done, because I think Nigel's been an absolute star key player in the PMS space, and I think he's going to be much missed. So Nigel, if you have nothing better to do with your life and happen to be watching this recording, please note that we are extremely grateful to you, not just for the responsible officer role, but more generally.
Thanks, Peter. If I can hand over to Kate.
Thank you. So I just want to talk about 2 items under my heading. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the move to annual provider information returns, but I also want to update the board on a recent outcome of a first-tier tribunal. So if I cover off first, we request provider information returns from providers in advance of inspection. As of the 1st of August, we have moved that to be an annual return that we will expect all providers to complete. There are 2 benefits to this. One is we will have overview of that data on an annual basis that will help inform our inspection planning. And the second benefit from a provider's perspective is they can plan how they respond to it because they know when it's going to happen. So we've just launched it in August, and we will be seeking feedback from providers about how they found it as we settle into that being our way of working. So that's good news. If I could just move on and talk about the outcome of a recent first-tier tribunal case that found in favour of CQC. And the judgment of the outcome was that CQC's approach in this instance was fair, reasonable and proportionate. So it was in relation to a service who were supporting 6 adults with learning disabilities, a residential service. And back in February 2018, they applied to the CQC to make use of an additional bedroom, so to go from 6 adults to 7 adults within the house, but also to convert a bungalow to have an 8th resident moving there. When we went out and looked at the service, we made a notice to refuse that because it wasn't in keeping with best practice nationally, but also critically, the provider hadn't consulted with the current residents about and sought their views about how they felt about the extension of the service. Discussions progressed, and we agreed to move our position slightly, where we said that actually the 7th bedroom we would be prepared to consider to be used if it was in respite and a kind of full impact assessment would be made. The provider didn't accept that, so we went all the way through to first tier tribunal, where the judge was confident that we'd use best practice in our decision making about refusing the request to extend the business, and that our approach had been fair, proportionate and reasonable throughout. So this is the second example in recent months where we've gone to court on the basis of our kind of registering the right support policy, and our position has been upheld, which I think is a positive outcome for those residents and for our approach.
So it is a good outcome for people who are going to be using those services, and I think thanks to the team to have got to that outcome. So thanks, Kate. That's you. Right, so Ted, I think it's you next.
Thank you. In terms of my report, just to cover a couple of areas. First of all, the thematic review into restraint, seclusion and segregation. We're now well into phase 2 of that. The board will remember we published the interim report on phase 1 in May of this year. And in phase 2, the two areas that we're... Sorry, so in phase 2, we're well into doing the site reviews. Following the interim report, the recommendations from that, there are 2 areas that are progressing well. First of all, the individual reviews of 62 people in segregation. Plans are well developed on that. And the expert working group has met and will meet again in November to give us advice and feed in to the work of the thematic review. So that is making good progress. In terms of our response to the abuse that was identified in Walton Hall in May, we've been focusing on hospitals for people with learning disabilities and autism, and some of the outcome of our inspections and enforcement action is highlighted in the text. As you'll see, we've found problems in other hospitals and had to take fairly significant enforcement action against a series of them, and that work is continuing, taking into account what we've learned from both the thematic review itself, but also following our assessment of Walton Hall. We'll be building the experience that comes out of the independent reviews into that programme as we get that. And I'm glad to say both independent reviews that the board has commissioned are making good progress, and we're looking forward to their reports. The next thing is the report, the upcoming publication on the urgent of the emergency care survey. This is a very important document that comes out every year. Last year, the board will remember that despite the pressures on emergency departments across England, patients reported very good experiences in many cases, and it will be very important in the light of the continuing pressures that emergency departments are experiencing with increased attendances over this year, to see what the effect has been on patients' experience. So that's going to be an important document when it comes out in October. Thank you.
Liz.
Thank you. I just wanted to welcome the fact that we're learning both from the thematic review into restraint, seclusion, and all our past regulatory activity, and from the specifics of the Walton Hall case, to really kind of take a very robust approach and to ensure, our rigour, because I think what this is showing is that people with learning disabilities and autism, who deserve a really good service are not always getting it. And I think it's absolutely right that we're taking that kind of strong approach. So I just really wanted to say that I welcome that.
Thank you. Well, the interim report, I think, highlighted the very poor service that many of these patients were receiving. And I think it's very important that we do respond very strongly to that, and of course to the abuses that have been found both in Morton Hall and on our inspections.
Thank you. John.
Thank you very much, Ted, and I very much welcome the robust response to events, and I think it's just worth, for those of us who have the memory, that CQC has been highlighting problems in this area for a number of years, and that our job is to highlight that and regulate and take enforcement action when and where we find it. It is for others to dedicate themselves through commissioning and improving to change those services fundamentally, and I hope that due acknowledgement will be given to not only our past notices of issues arising in this area, but also to take note of the report that you're putting out around segregation and to act upon it.
I think this is a very important report, and I think the board was shocked, as I was, when we read the interim report, and a real sense of how the whole system has let these patients down. And we are part of solving that. We cannot solve it alone, and the whole system that is involved in care for these patients needs to step up to the mark.
Chris, were you wanted to come in, or were you just?
Thank John for his. Thank John for his comments. I think there's a strong sense that talking to the people who use services and the representatives in a number of events that we held, one that we held quite recently in this building, there's a clear sense that not only should action be taken by all the groups that you've mentioned there, but action must be taken this time. And I think it's our role to make sure that we continue to press for that action, and also we continue to see what we ourselves can do as an organisation. I think that's what you'll see as we do the remaining work on both the RSS review and our response to the two independent reviews when they happen.
Thanks. Robert.
I'd just like to add my support. I think in the past, and I'm talking about the distant past perhaps, there's been a feeling that a regulator should not take action because it wasn't practical for other parts of the system to correct what everyone would agree was a defect. But it seems to me that when all due notice has been given, when a problem is widely shared and agreed exists, where it impacts as seriously on service users as we know these things do, that it's only right that we as a regulator do take robust action. Otherwise, why are we here?
Thank you. I think we all agree with that. Okay, shall we, Malta, I think, come to you.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning. So to update the board on our preparations for the UK's exit from the EU, as the papers say, this is a rapidly evolving picture, and at the time of writing this, Parliament had not yet passed the bill of how it expects a delay to EU exit should there be not a deal agreed by the end of October. But of course, we continue to prepare for a no-deal scenario alongside other public bodies and the civil service. Our risk assessment for CQC itself remains low, as it did earlier in the year, and we continue to be ready to adapt our approach, support communication to services and the public, and of course share any insights around risks and issues that might arise around EU exit as and when it happens with the department and other relevant bodies. And we'll continue to provide regular updates at the board monthly, I think, from now on.
Thank you. Okay, Ian, is that it for?
That's it.
That's it for that. Perfect. So, Kirsty, I think we come to you and Chris for the performance report.
If I kick that off.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, that's me.
Right. Go.
Sorry. We should choreograph our lines a little better. So I just if I just step through the performance report and pick out some of the highlights, and then individual directors will come in on the detail, but as necessary. I think registration is broadly on target, and now I think we're starting to see a consistency of performance, which is good to see. But it's also worth noting, I think an awful lot of continuous improvement work is going on around individual processes, and there are one or two areas where the numbers appear to be falling. And Kirsty, I know can talk to that in a few minutes if anyone would like to understand the detail of that. But I think the headline there would be we would expect to be reclassifying some of the categories of registration that better reflect the work that's actually going on. In terms of inspections, I think what we're seeing is a strong and consistent performance. But the emphasis, I think, across the board in all of the inspections it is always about going to places where we think there are highest risk. And I think I'm really pleased over the last 6 to 12 months we've really improved our focus on going back to places where there are risks, and if we've got choices in terms of where we spend our time and energy, we're going back to the higher risk places, which I think is good. We've got a much better understanding of risk in providers than perhaps we once had. I think safeguarding is another area that I think we've always had a good story to tell there, but I think this month is particularly good. And again, we've done some work on examining the pathway for safeguarding referrals, because we recognise that's a very important part of what we do, and it needs to be done properly and well and consistently. And I think that's what's happening. In terms of rating suspension, although this is a relatively new thing for us to do, we feel it's important that when we are telling a story about a provider to the public, if we are doing and carrying out any sort of investigation, the public should understand that they can't necessarily rely on the previous rating. Equally, we have an obligation, I think, to providers to make sure that if we're going to change their rating, we have done a full comprehensive inspection. So the suspension process was created in order to make sure that we can be clear with the public that something is going on, that we're carrying out an investigation into something, and that the previous rating is something that can't be relied on until that investigation is complete. So between April and July this year, we suspended 4 providers' ratings, and I think you'll start to see that happening pretty routinely. I don't think you'll ever see very, very large numbers, but it will be a tool that we will use in order to make sure that our work is visible and clear to the public. In terms of reports, I think some really good performance in adult social care and PMS. The hospital performance in terms of report timeliness has dropped this month, but I do think it's worth just stressing that the volume of reports in hospitals is very high this month, and that to some extent is a function of catching up, recognising that some reports are written over a couple of months. So there will be a sort of month by month change, I think, in terms of the way that the hospital reports are reported. In terms of finance, our current revenue overspend of £1.2 million and a full-year deficit of £2 million if we do nothing. But it's worth stressing that the executive team did a full budget review 2 weeks ago, and there's a number of very specific actions that we're putting in place, which has given us the confidence that we will be able to bring the budget back to break even by year end. So you should see an improving picture on finances over the next few reporting periods. And I think that will also reflect some one-off charges, such as changes to some of our estates costs that will also wash through the budget as well. In terms of people, I think sickness and turnover remain within the expected ranges. As ever, they are topics that receive an awful lot of management attention, and we will aspire to improve, particularly sickness. In terms of risks, I think the headlines there remain that resourcing of our change activity remains a risk, but it is at the moment an improving picture. And the second part is exiting the European Union. As Malta's just described, I think we are confident that as an organisation we are in a good position. But I think the watchword around managing this risk will be around organisational flexibility. because as things change with providers, we will want to follow the risk, and we will want to make sure that our people are deployed to follow risks wherever they may emerge. So I'm going to pause there, Peter, and ready for colleagues to answer questions.
John.
Thank you very much. One comment, one question. The comment is that firstly, thank you for the new presentation of the performance report. I think the significant improvements make it more accessible. That the helpful run chart of the report timeliness of hospitals demonstrates that actually the month-to-month variation up or down is within the parameters you'd expect of the existing system. I know Ted knows that the system needs changing, and there are huge efforts to do that, but I don't think we should focus too much on the month-by-month figures because it demonstrates differently. But my question is actually to Rosie, that in the actions returned to rating, there are 13% inadequates that are outside KPI. Just you tell us what we're doing to do that, because that 13% of that number of practice means a lot of people being affected.
And this is something we're having a focus on at the moment, and in particular those practices, we're looking at all of the practices that are rated inadequate, especially more than twice, and looking at what support and action they're getting to actually improve their ratings. I think this probably reflects some of the changes that have happened in PMS with introducing a new process, which is just embedding within the directorate around the annual regulatory review, which has had an impact on the scheduling and the way that our teams are working, and this is certainly something that we are picking up and actioning. So I would aim for an improvement in that in the next month.
So, am I right in thinking we've sort of raised this before across the directorates, because it worries?
You're absolutely correct.
Yes. So am I also right in thinking that sometimes it's not that nothing is happening, but there is other activity going on, which replaces the need, but we don't capture it in the stats here?
And that sometimes we're finding that providers who are inadequate are being merging with other providers and working with other practices, and then we have to have a discussion with both the practice and the CCG to work out what the most appropriate time to go back into that provider is, because the landscape's changing quite a lot. So there is other factors as well. Yes.
Not necessarily for now, Chairman, I just wonder if this is the right measure we should be using for this aspect of life.
Or it requires some amplification. Yeah. We need something, don't we? Yeah. Good. Robert.
It's a good slide on our staff turnover range, which appears reassuringly to be in target. But PMS seems in particular to be on an upward trend since the beginning of the year, whereas everyone else seems to be bobbing up and down a bit, and I wondered if there's any specific reason for that.
This is largely due to retirement, actually. We've got a significant proportion of people who are at retirement age and have decided to retire. We are monitoring that very closely. We have introduced a new process, and that is still bedding down, but we don't think that that's having an impact. But from what I understand, it's retirement, and actually we have it was part of the factor as we were looking at our glide down path with the business planning from last year to look at the reducing the number of inspectors, and that's happened through natural turnover. So.
Sorry, I couldn't press the button. Liz.
Thank you. Also had a question on turnover and sickness. I just wondered whether we also have data broken down by equality protected characteristics in relation to turnover, just whether we know who is leaving us and why. I think we may be having a discussion at our next board meeting about the whole people agenda. So maybe we could discuss that there, but I just wasn't sure whether we had that data or not. And I have another completely unrelated question, which is there's a slide about the percentage of inspections undertaken based on new information. It looks as if it doesn't change very much. It goes kind of up and down a bit. But I wondered whether we expect that there might be a change as we develop our plans about being intelligence-driven, and whether actually this is something that we would be expecting to see changes going forward.
So in terms of the data, yes, we do, and we can bring that, or we can circulate it around and share it at the next meeting.
Well, I just wanted to add that actually what we're finding is that with the annual regulatory review process in primary care, where we are speaking to providers every year, it is enabling us to pick up new information, that it is triggering more inspections as a result. So it is a step in the right direction in terms of being intelligence-driven, and that is enabling us to act on that information quickly.
Ted.
At the moment, a lot of our inspections are driven by the schedule. It's so long since we did the inspection, so we do another one. I think we want to move to a much more intelligence-driven. So I would expect that to change over time, and I expect that to be a very positive sign when it does.
Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. The people and learning metrics for this month, the reporting has several metrics that have been taken off. I presume this is to do with the comments back in July about our scale of ambition and just reworking those, but I would certainly hope that those metrics around well-being of colleagues, our workforce diversity recorded on ESR, our recruitment outcomes for underrepresented groups. These metrics are, I think, very critical for us, and I hope they will be coming back, or I'm asking that question.
So one of the many things on Jill's list to do is a review of all our HR data, which she is actually looking at. So I think we've got some data that's good, some data we probably could represent in a better way, and some stuff we collect that we don't really look at that much. So Jill is reviewing all that, and we'll bring a better pack of information back. And whether she'll get it back by next month, she's nodding at me, so there you go, next month.
Good. Okay, we happy? Oh, sorry, Jora.
Just one question. There was a comment made earlier with the hospital reports taking potentially months to write. But when I look at the change programme, I couldn't see anything that could help reduce those months' timeline. Is there a piece of work we're doing in the change programme to help with that?
There is a QI programme, but there's also Ted's doing some work, aren't you, Ted, looking at your processes in terms of what you do?
So a couple of things. One, there's a QI programme looking at our current process and how we can improve it. And there's also some work done on the digital publisher that publishes the reports, because that creates significant delays in some reports occasionally. So there's the parallel work going on there. And I mentioned before to the board the introduction of standard statements, which took place in July, and we hope will have a beneficial effect over the next few months as the reports come through. Having said that, I think John's comment right at the start of this is entirely right, and that is the figures, while they go up and down month by month, they are not changing significantly. We haven't made that underlying fundamental change in the process that can actually deliver the KPI in a reliable way. So what we're doing within the directorate at the moment is going to pilot a different approach to the evidence appendix, which is the bulk of most reports, to see if we can shorten that dramatically, so that we can produce a much shorter, more focused report, which I think is going to be much more useful to the public to read, but equally much quicker for us to produce. So I think that may well be the fundamental change that can drive the improvement in KPI.
I just wonder if it would make sense to connect the different initiatives to the KPIs, because at the moment there's, to the amateur like myself, there's a slight disconnection and you have to connect the dots. Would it be worth just looking at an opportunity to say, by delivering these initiatives, we expect this KPI to reduce, rather than having them held separately?
we can look at that.
Anything else anybody wants to raise on the performance report? Paul.
Can I just ask a question on the risk register? It's noticeable that the market oversight score has gone up by +4 in the quarter. I was just wondering whether there was anything that we should be aware of in respect to that.
So if I can respond to that, that's a specific risk about the challenge we have about recruitment and retention within that team. So it's a very specialist area of business with obviously strong competition out there. This is on Jill, our new people director's long to-do list when we're thinking about retaining staff with the right skill set. So this is a specific issue about challenges we've had around recruiting into the team and retaining that specialism.
And it's worth just sort of being absolutely explicit that part of the challenge is this is particular skill sets that are very much in demand in the private sector that is able to pay a lot more than we're able to pay. So recruiting the people is a huge challenge, but really important, Kate, as you say. Anything else on the performance report, or shall we move on to the change report? So can I check, Ian, whether you're introducing this or we go straight to Kirsty? Straight to Kirsty. Perfect.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so in terms of the change report for this quarter, I thought I'd just update you on the portfolio and some highlights. I'll talk a little bit about some of the QI piece, and then I'll hand over to Mark to talk about the digital elements of the portfolio. So in terms of the portfolio, we set the portfolio up in April. We said we'd do a quarterly review of the portfolio to make sure that the portfolio was still strategically aligned and each one of those projects and programs within the portfolio was delivering against our anticipated benefits and outcomes. We did that review in August, and as a result of that, we have taken a couple of projects out of the portfolio and repurposed those and reinvested the money into 3 new programs. We now have a program around intelligence-driven enablers, which is taking the intelligence work, putting some program rigor around that to ensure that we are really prioritising the ones that deliver the biggest benefit to the organisation, and Mark is taking that one forwards. We have a programme around improving regulation today, which is about looking at how we can improve what we do in the regulatory space under our current strategy, and Kate is taking that one forwards. And then we have a new programme around transforming our organisation, which is a piece of work, a programme which is aligned to our new strategy development to basically put together an underpinning delivery plan to fit with the new strategy. Overall, in the portfolio, we have now have 7 programs, of which contain 42 projects. What we've done in that is we've identified projects which we want to take forward this year, and we are adopting a sort of a pipeline approach in some areas where we have a stack of projects in a similar area of activity, but we have constrained the resources around them, and we will just move through them on a pipeline approach to ensure that we, as one delivers off the end of the pipeline, the next one comes in. So we are really clear about what it is we want to deliver over the coming few months. Overall, with the portfolio as a whole, the performance trend is green. We are making good progress on a number of fronts around a number of the more strategic projects, and I think we are really starting to get to grips with delivery around some of the more nutty, difficult issues we're wrestling with. In terms of highlights, I think it'd be good to flag that our Give Feedback on Care has passed its GDS review at first attempt and is now into public beta. This is a real significant achievement for us. It's the first one through the pipeline and is now out there in public, and is actually making a huge difference already in public beta with a 40% improvement in uptake with just the redesign of that front end and the new service. So we're getting a lot more information coming through, which again is a really positive indication how the way we're working is starting to improve services and on our regulatory ability for the public out there. We are also making some good progress around our comms strategy and developing products to support the comms. We are talking. We now have an outline strategy for the board to consider, plus a set of information sitting underneath that. We've also established a sort of transformation staff reference group, which is a staff spread around the organisation, which we can use as a sounding board to check ideas, check comms, check the messaging, so make sure it's landing well. And I think that's really good start to get the two-way feedback around the communication piece. In terms of our QI, again, good progress is being made there. We are building capacity with our QI partner. Our QI team has now been fully recruited, and we are now starting to work closely with the projects, with the business in terms of identifying projects and taking those forwards and putting in a framework to sort of govern that whole piece of work. We are rolling out gold standard training for 15 colleagues across the organisation. These will be our QI experts who will support support the QI initiatives throughout the organisation. And so they start in October. And we're also making good progress on the strategic QI projects that we currently have on stocks, registration improvement, and in the performance report you can see some of the improvements are starting to feed through in terms of our productivity and performance there. Report timeliness is supporting particularly the hospital space around that, and also looking at consistency of our application around our regulatory model. In terms of people, Jill Nicholson started with us in August. She's our new people director. She is doing a lot of work to review our people plan and look at our priorities. She's got some key areas of focuses around work on reward and recognition, how we lead change through the organisation, and how we improve sort of the experience of our colleagues in terms of how we can simplify policies and procedures to make it frictionless to deal with HR. Jill will bring a more detailed report to the board at the next quarter. Mark, do you want to just pick up on the IT bits?
Yes, thanks, Kirsty. So we're making continued steady progress in our digital change portfolio. We've completed a video conferencing upgrade project for meeting rooms in Newcastle and London. We're making really good progress in our new corporate Wi-Fi, which is progressing well for all of our major offices. We have a really significant Office 365 rollout across the organisation, which is progressing very well. We've had over 2,000 of our colleagues have now been trained in our first rollout, which is the Teams software, OneDrive and SharePoint for all of our CQC records, and we're now in a situation where we can move forward with the remaining part of the programme, which is to make that platform available on our mobile devices. We're making good progress in improving the performance of our business intelligence systems, and a significant programme of digital foundations will be getting to its sort of final procurement stages this week with the release of the ITT, and this is to replace our core service currently under the IMS3 contract, the Service Desk Application Management and End User Computing Services. And finally, from me, we're excited to bring a business case to the board next month to create a new regulatory platform to replace our current legacy CRM systems to dramatically improve the core regulatory platforms that we have.
Thank you. Good, thank you. Can I ask, I'm not sure, Kirsty, whether it's really you or Chris Day, but on the give feedback on care, what are we doing to make the public really understand how valuable that is? And I ask that because quite often friends and colleagues and so on say to me they just had an experience of the NHS and it was good, bad or indifferent, and I say, well, that's really useful information, would you like to feed it into the CQC? And their normal response is, didn't know you'd be interested. So have we got some plans to promote it? Chris?
Shall I? So, as Kirsty rightly said, we're really pleased that we've got through to private beta the first time of asking. What private beta effectively means is we're doing the final pieces of both testing and development in order to make sure the service will run consistently every day for everybody that wants to use it. We believe that the work involved in that private beta will be finished by mid-October. So at the end of October, we're trying to time it in with broadly the sort of state of care launch, but it may just come slightly after that. We want to do we're talking to public groups at the moment and other people that represent people who use services about how they can support us in the relaunch of that service as a service. I think you're right, Pete. I think there's two things that are going on. One is that we see a lot of use of share experience, but a lot of people pull out at the point. So as Kirsty rightly said, there's been a significant growth in people getting to the end of the process. But I think we can do more to publicise that this is a service that we offer. So we talked to the 40 organisations that represent many of the disease groups and conditions that people have about their support for this. And we're looking at a date in the third week of October that we think will have finished the rest of the work that we need to do to support how this information then feeds into, because there's two parts to it, how this information feeds into our dashboards and how we're understanding for both our colleagues in intelligence and our inspector colleagues, but also how we want to use this as a way of closing the loop to feedback about what we've done about services. So we want to make sure those essentially back-end elements work well so that we can launch the service with the knowledge that everything is working, not just the front end. So I will certainly update the board again with the details of what that looks like as we approach the launch of it, if that's useful.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. And I don't want to sort of dwell too much on my really scientific sample of a few friends that pass this stuff on to me, but I think everything that you and colleagues have done in this space is really great. But if people think that we're not interested, it's only the trust or the GP practice or whatever, they've had the good or bad experience that's interested, then we are missing out on something that's really important to us. That was the point I was trying to make. John.
Thank you, Peter. Kirsty, just a couple of questions, if I may. The first is in your report back about to report timeliness. There's a phrase that says work across adult social care and primary medical services work streams has successfully concluded. My understanding of sort of QI, continuous improvement, is that work continues. Do you mean by that the portfolio responsibility has ended but the work is continuing, because ultimately this is an important interface for the public to gain access, or do you genuinely mean it's all stopped? No. And I have a second question after you've answered that.
Okay, no, and I'll let Kate and Rosie give you the detail. I think from a QI perspective, we're consistently hitting our targets. The question is, what next?
So if I can just talk a bit about the adult social care work. So we introduced a new report / slightly shorter report, and we've also introduced a way where we share that draft report with the provider. We're picking up the phone and having a conversation about our findings. So that piece of work is concluded. What I've been interested in is, as a result of that, have we seen an improvement in productivity? And we haven't to the extent that I would have expected. So I had a bit of a conversation with my heads of inspection on Monday to try and understand why we're not seeing the impact of something that we should be benefiting from, particularly if we're going to be rolling out a similar sort of approach in hospitals. And the feedback we're getting from providers is they are saying, great, it's a shorter report, but you haven't included all of this really important information we want you to be evidencing in your inspection. So I think it's a perfect example where we think we're introducing a new product that's going to have a big impact on our productivity, but we need to continue to monitor the impact to be, are we confident that it's delivered what we've expected? So there's some good things about it. I think it's helping with relationships between inspectors and providers, having that opportunity to have the check-in phone call on the findings. But I'm going to be paying close attention over the next couple of months about why is that now not translating as in the way that I would have expected to increase productivity. And obviously we'll feed that into the work that's going on with the hospital's timeliness as well.
And certainly from a PMS point of view, it's something that we're continually monitoring, continually looking at how we can improve our efficiencies across the directorate. Some of that very much relates to the wider IT programs that we've discussed and things like the publishing software around the reports and things, but some of it is absolutely work that we're looking at efficiency within the Directorate. So it is a continual improvement piece of work. It's not something that we're just going to lose focus on now.
And my other quick question, as you know, I raised yesterday in the Transformation Subcommittee that I thought the number of people going for gold training was light for this size of organisation, and I just think it's worth reiterating your comments on that.
So we have 15 people going through. We are currently talking to our providers around whether we want to can take some more people through, but we're also looking at putting some of our existing experts on to train the trainer training so that we can bring that training in-house and then train more people to be at gold standards as we start to work through our programme, because we recognise 15 is a starting point, but the ambition is for more.
Good, thank you, Ian.
Peter, just to sort of reinforce a couple of points, I think the give feedback on your care service, I think, is important in a service in and of itself, but I think it's also important as a pattern and a method, and the learning that's come out of that is replicable. And I think what we'll see is as we introduce more digital services in the future, we will get faster because we've learned some lessons. I also would just like to pay tribute to Mark and his team, because I think he rather skated over the fact that we have moved all of our records last weekend from a data centre into the cloud, which is no small undertaking, and he just sort of quietly said that we moved it onto SharePoint. That was a massive undertaking, and was done quickly and quietly with very few problems given the scale of the undertaking that was on. So I do think the board need to acknowledge the significance of that as the first step in our moving all of our services into the cloud, and the impact that has both from a usability of services point of view for all of our teams, the accessibility for providers and the public, but also the cost effectiveness for us as an organisation.
It is the real mark of success, Mark, that these things happen and they're really important and they don't get a lot of comment. You know, it's a real mark of success, I think. So I absolutely endorse what Ian said. Well done to everybody. Any other comments on the change report? Gosh. Right, so we're way ahead of time. This is most unusual. Liz, you've got about an hour and a half. talk about the Regulatory Governance Committee.
Thank you very much, Peter. I don't think I'll need that. Yes, so we had a very good meeting of the Regulatory Governance Committee yesterday. We started out by just finalising our terms of reference and our approach, and I suppose changes from how we've worked before. We are going to take a look at regulatory risks in a rather more sort of systematic way than we have done before, so that we know why we're diving into particular areas, and we're going to use the risk register to guide us in that. We're going to continue to do deep dives into specific areas within, primary medical services or adult social care or whatever, but we're also going to look at future challenges and opportunities in regulation, and we're also going to look at cross-cutting issues where people may be using services from across those divides, if you like. We also agreed that each topic we discuss will have, if you like, a clear destination. So it might be that we are, from the discussion, giving assurance to the board that we've looked at this area and we are assured that the risks in that area of regulation are being effectively mitigated and managed, or that we've given a steer for some improvement, or that we're coming to the board with some recommendation or other, so that we know where we're taking the discussions. We then had a very, very interesting and clear presentation on what is a very complicated, changing landscape of provision. And this was about complex providers and also corporate providers. So whereas perhaps 5 years ago you might have had an acute trust that was providing one or maybe two hospitals, you might now have an acute trust that's providing GP services from one or more locations. so in other words, services are not fitting into the neat divides that we have categorised things as, but also corporate providers in the areas like corporate providers of both specific types of services but also multiple types of services, and often over multiple locations, not only within one region but perhaps nationally. And so we had a good discussion of what this means for our regulatory model. So how do we regulate these changing types of service? And at what level do we regulate them? So do we regulate lots of specific services and aggregate them up to the provider, or do we look at the provider? And so we had a very good, thorough discussion of all of that. We gave a steer from the committee to the team that's working that up, and that will ultimately come back to the board as part of our future strategy. So it wasn't for decision immediately, but it was a good and robust discussion. And I think one thing that it identified was just an assurance issue around how the work that's going on about the improving regulation today, so the specific current pieces of change that are happening, the link between that and the work in preparation for our new strategic plan, and just wanting to make sure that that's absolutely seamless, that whatever we're doing today fits into that future direction, and that we're not going to have to kind of change course again. So we had a little bit of discussion about that. I think that was, unless fellow members of the committee want to add or change anything, I think those are the main topics.
Great, thank you. Oh, Mark, yes.
Liz, I enjoyed coming to your meeting yesterday. Just one thing that came up, and it actually comes back to Kirsty's report about sandboxing, because again we did talk about new models of provision and how to regulate, and we thought we could look at that with some providers in a sandbox process. And we're already using sandboxing for the DOLS, or the deprivation of liberty changes, and I'm just sort of wondering, it's a question, it's a very broad question, is have we got enough resource to use this process? Because it seems to me it adds a lot of value.
So if I can just separate those out. So under improving regulation today, the kind of priority piece of work we need to deliver is around the changes to the DOLS, the liberty protection safeguards. Our second priority piece of work is around sandboxing, and in that we've got 3 work streams, and the first one is the one that went live this week. And in it, so the sorts of things we're talking about is how we have a conversation with a provider. They're developing a new way of working about how we might regulate it. So it's with some additional funding, Malta, and we think it might give us a kind of model for how we can be agile and flexible as a regulator as the landscape continues to change, as Liz has described. Malta, in terms of, is there anything else to say around sandboxing? It's obviously very early days. So.
Yeah, quite right. So the sandbox specifically is around how new technologies and innovations are being used in health and social care, which is why it involves developers of those approaches. Alongside the providers that are implementing it, and the first one of those is now live, and we're going to trial 2 more in this financial year. We're trialling them because we want to understand whether this could become part of CQC's overall approach. I think there are some principles to sandboxing from the technology sector that also apply in how we work with new care models that are not doing new technologies within that, and those are specifically around working alongside and with the services as they change, so that as a regulator we understand what they're trying to do, we understand what some of the issues or gaps might be, in particular around what good looks like, so that when it comes to the point of assessment and regulation, there's no surprises between us and the services that we assess, and there's a good common understanding of what good looks like and what we would be looking for. So there's common principles across how we work with new care models and changes in care models as well. The sandboxing we're doing specifically at the moment is around new technologies that are being used. The first sandbox that's now live is around digital triage and services, and we're going to run 2 more, one on the use of AI and machine learning in diagnostics, and one on new services in adult social care that are connecting people who are looking for care in their own homes with caring staff. We're going to launch those later this month.
Can I just add, I mean, having been sandboxed myself in financial services not very long ago, I survived, yeah. No, but seriously, I mean, your point about resource obviously is really important, Mark, but actually this reduced the resource of the Financial Conduct Authority as well as the resource that we as the provider are having to put in, because it was a more sort of streamlined process. I mean, because the alternative is that you try and launch a new model of whatever it is, your new service, your new product, and then you get into all kinds of regulatory toing and froing that takes forever. So I think done well, this will actually reduce rather than increase resource that we need. But I mean, obviously, you still need enough resource to be able to do it as you would whether you're sandboxing or a more traditional approach. Malta's nodding, so I must be right. Good. Ian.
Just to come back to Liz's point about making sure that the decisions we make today make us fit for the future, I think it's a really good point, and I think it's a topic we'll come back to again and again. But I think what we're trying to do is recognise there are some things that we know will be different in the future, both in terms of our regulatory approach, but also the types of providers and the configurations and constructs of providers in the future. So I think we see flexibility as being a very important guiding principle, both in terms of the technology that we're putting in. All of the technology we're putting in is very flexible. We're trying to use commodity technology as far as we possibly can. We're thinking about processes in terms of can we change them quite easily, and we're also thinking about making sure that our people are as flexible and are able to change as well. So programs like continuous improvement are a vital part of that, so that we know that as an organisation we can flex if events flex and change beyond that which we can currently predict. But it's absolutely the right question to be asking. But that flexibility thing is going to have to run through absolutely everything we do from this point forward.
Good. So that takes us to any other business. Is there any other business from the board? Anybody wants to raise? Okay, so that's the end of the board meeting. We will now take questions from the public. And Robin, I know you wanted to raise a question, so do you want to come and do so, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Robin Pike, Healthwatch, Hertfordshire. Perhaps I could express my appreciation of the opportunity to ask questions to the board. This is a valuable part of the meeting, I think. I'd like to ask what proportion of inspections across the 3 inspectorates are currently unannounced. And I say this in the knowledge, the experience that I know of a surgery that had over 3 weeks' notice of its inspection.
So thank you for your nice comment, and thank you also for giving notice. It's so much better when we get the question in advance, because then we can get the information. So I can tell you that in the last 3 months across CQC, 62.5% of inspections were unannounced. But I think it's also worth saying that it's slightly more complicated than that, because there are announced inspections that will have an unannounced element to them. So we may have announced we're going to do an inspection of a hospital, but have an unannounced, we're going to look at A&E on a Sunday night or something, which we haven't announced. And equally, unannounced inspections may well have an announced follow-up, because you want to talk to a particular person in the service and they're not there when you arrive unannounced. So it's slightly more complicated than it's just one or the other. And there's quite a variation across the directorates, with much more unannounced in adult social care and in hospitals than in primary care, primarily because of the different nature of what it is we're inspecting, I think. So I don't know whether any of the chief inspectors want to add anything, or whether that answers your question. Rosie.
Yes, just to add to that, only just over 5% of primary medical services inspections are unannounced. The majority are announced. And this historically has been because we want to make sure that we've got the right people in the surgeries, particularly on the day that we go in, to be able to talk to and get the information we need from. There are some situations in primary medical services where we have to announce our arrival. For example, some of the prisons work we do, we obviously need to work with the security arrangements to get in. So some locations we can't. It's not as easy to do an unannounced inspection. I think it's something we need to put under review and have a look at. So thank you for the question.
Sorry, Morton.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it's also important to emphasise that the right balance between announced and unannounced inspections is relevant for the impact that we want to have on provider. So the academic research shows that actually the anticipatory impact of announced inspections can have an impact on the quality of care and the actions that organisations take to improve. It's quite easy to be cynical about that and say it's about a lick of paint, etc. Actually, that might happen in a minority of cases, but in large it creates quite a lot of good activity that we would like to see. So I think this isn't just about unannounced as being better. This is around the right balance between announced and unannounced inspections to get both effects of encouraging improvement through our activity.
Good. Thank you, Robin, very much indeed. Anybody else in public? David.
David Hogarth, Neighbour Care, St John's Wood and Neighbour Care. I have to apologise that my questions are unannounced. There are two of them, but I only thought of them as I sat here. And the first one is about the annual provision of information by providers, the switch to it. Isn't there a bit of a danger that the information you receive will be designed to stop you coming, except where the case is they are hoping to go up from good to outstanding, in which case they'll be only too glad to see you? That's my first question. The second was that one of the other things missing in the performance report is the whistleblowing statistic, and I rather miss this because I rather like to know how many whistleblowing events, how many of these events where people really sort of put their job and their popularity on the line to give information are actually sort of acted on in a way that they would hope for and expect. Those are my two questions.
So, Kate, can you answer the first, and Ian has volunteered to answer the second.
So the content of the provider information returns, what we're asking for isn't any different. It's just that we're moving to asking for it annually. So you could say the hope is that under the new arrangement we will have better visibility about what's going on in those services, because we'll be getting that information every year. What I really noticed coming into adult social care is there is a huge anxiety from a provider when we turn up to inspect, but also there seems to be a real appetite to want to show us what they've done. So the idea of providers completing forms in a way to kind of deter us arriving, I've not seen any evidence of that. Generally, I hear providers say, come back sooner because look at all the improvements we've made since your last inspection. We want you to come back and come and have a look at what we're doing.
Thanks, Peter. In terms of the whistleblowing, we said when we revised the performance measures at the beginning of the year that we would keep them under review during the year. Whistleblowing and enforcement were two areas which I think the way we were presenting the numbers was slightly misleading. We had a number of conversations around total numbers, which just doesn't really tell the story. So we're hoping next month to come back with a more detailed assessment of whistleblowing and the consequences thereof, because I think you're absolutely right that people are interested in what happens, not in the total numbers necessarily. But that's a much more complex picture than the graphical information we were presenting was. So we hopefully will have a bit more of a story around that for next month.
Thank you very much. Could I just also say that this the new report that Liz Sace was talking about, I forgot its exact title. I find it very hard to understand because there are a lot of abbreviations in it. ARR quality report was one thing. There was something else. There was a yellow section of it which hardly appeared, but nonetheless it had its abbreviation, which I didn't understand. And in general, if somebody could explain to me afterwards what it was all about, I'd be very grateful.
We've done it deliberately, David, so you don't understand it. No, seriously, point noted. Thank you very much. Anything else from anybody? Right, so board, we were due to meet again at 1:30. Let's bring that forward by half an hour, since we seem to have finished early. So other than that, we're done for a break. Thank you.